you share with us kind of the that very special moment that you had in your lives and works journeys by experiencing kind of and co-shaping kind of the T groups and the beginnings of the T groups, which kind of in many ways kind of open up a whole new other set of eyes for process kind of and the deeper aspects kind of the social field. And then you went back and you became an innovator and practitioner in bringing and applying some of these principles in the field of creating learning environments as an educator, the field of consulting, kind of by working as an action researcher and consultant and helper, and then also as a leader, kind of as a department chair, in the group you have been leading at MIT Sloan. So in our group, in the MOOC, we have all these groups. We have educators, we have consultants, coaches, and we have practitioner leaders. So could you take us kind of as you returned from Bethel and took kind of these insights and applied them to these three domains of practice as an educator, as a consultant, as a leader? Can you kind of take us back there and share with us a little bit some of the questions, the challenges, and what it is that you find working or not working, kind of that could, as many of us kind of move onto the same journey now, could help us as we craft our own path of innovation into these fields?
I think the best way to answer that issue is to point out that we, at that point, had a new concept which we called experiential education. What came out of the Bethel years, where I became a trainer and did a lot of groups and so on, was the notion that the traditional classroom was a very poor way to teach interpersonal, group, or any of these human relations processes. And incidentally, we noticed that experiential education was also being invented at MIT in the engineering labs and in various other courses, where suddenly much more emphasis was given to students playing with the stuff and doing more learning on their own. So I think the whole society was undergoing a kind of, not a shift, but, well, no, I take that back. I think Dewey and pragmatism had already sort of said, you've got to let the child learn. So I think in a way we were actualizing what pragmatism in education had been preaching for a long time. And so we began to invent with our executive classes. We couldn't use T groups because that was emotionally too potentially dangerous. But for my middle executives, I created L groups, learning groups, where much of the time the group was told you have time to do your own group work. And other times we would give them tasks to do, where we would do role playing and other things that stimulated behavior, which they could then analyze. So we went as far as we could without going completely to the lab, because these volunteer students, at Bethel they were all volunteers, but we didn't think you could impose that kind of learning on people who had not chosen it. In the consulting field, it was quite by happenstance that the same kind of learning occurred in me, because I was by then pretty much an expert on communication and group dynamics and how to run a meeting and all this stuff. So when I started to consult with digital, I was ready to, teach them how to be better at various group processes, and was consistently ignored. They were a very unruly group that constantly interrupted each other and fought and argued. And I would point out the dysfunctional concept of if you interrupt people, you know, you lose information. And they would say, "You're absolutely right, Ed. You're right. We shouldn't do that," and would continue to do it. So eventually, I had to learn that this notion of the consultant is the expert who teaches the client how to do something better. At least in this company, that wasn't working. So I then began to be more mindful myself. I figured out that there had to be a reason why brilliant people starting a successful company behaved so rudely to each other, and figured out that because they were super passionate and they were betting their company on their decisions, and they were academics. They had all come out of engineering degrees, and they had learned that academics argue until an idea can no longer be shot down. And when you can no longer find anything wrong with it, then maybe it's correct, you try it. And that's what they were doing. They were fighting for their life. So I invented, quite by accident, a solution. On one of these occasions where they were arguing and person A said, "No, here's what I think we should do." I, at that moment, went to the flip chart, and he started into his idea, and I started to write it down, and he was interrupted. And so instead of saying, "You bad boy, you shouldn't interrupt," I turned to the guy who was trying to get his idea out, and I said, "I didn't get all of that. Could you give me the rest of it?" And magically, the group shut up. Somehow they got the point that it wasn't about interruption, it was about missing the rest of his thought. And I had sort of given them freedom to listen to the rest of his thought by taking charge of the process. And from that point on, they used the flip chart as their vehicle for discipline. And at the end of that particular meeting, several of them did say, "Ed, that was really helpful." First time I heard that. So I thought that was an important lesson, that you have to get in the mindset of the client to know what they need. So I don't know how much this would have applied to other consulting situations, but I was very fortunate that my first major consultant client was someone who forced me to think this through. Are you going to be an expert? Or, as I came to label it, are you going to be a process consultant where you're going to enter their process and help them figure it out? So, for example, this would apply immediately to these groups that you have. These groups could, if they wanted to, delegate to one of them on a rotating basis. You be the process observer and help us with our learning process. Instead of getting into the fray, watch what's going on and see if you can say something helpful. And learn that that role teaches you some very important skills, observational skills. So in these L groups with the classes, we always ask that one of them be the delegated process observer, and at the end of each session, that they take at least 15 minutes to process what had gone on in the group in the past hour. That's where we thought the real learning would take place.